All right, good evening, everybody. I've got 7 o'clock here, so let us call to order our work session meeting here for Monday, December 2nd. I hope everybody had a wonderful Thanksgiving holiday, and now we're back at work. Please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, the next item on our agenda is comments from the public. Before I open the floor to public comment, we updated our public comment policy a couple years ago to provide an opportunity for the board to respond to those comments that had questions, not at the meeting, but at the next meeting. So we had a few themes that emerged last week from multiple comments. So just two brief real follow-ups. One is to the Shadowwood Lane folks. We all hear you. We thank you for coming out to our meeting. We ask you to bear with us, obviously, during construction. Things always, look a little worse before they're better, and we will provide some sort of screening when the project is all said and done. The next group that had public comment was the proponents of EV buses. We thank you for your comments. We do have an agenda item later here with an update from Mr. Dade. That's a positive update on that. So with that, I will open the floor. I will say, Board of Education welcomes comments from the public. Each person wishing to speak is asked to speak into the microphone, identify themselves, and respectively limit their comments to 3 minutes. 2 opportunities to speak are available, one early in the meeting, limited to 30 minutes, and one at the end of each meeting. Each speaker may address the board only once at both the opening and closing portions of the agenda. Please remember there will be no cross-dialogue between speakers and between members of the board. All speakers are to conduct themselves in a civil manner. Obscene language, libelous statements, threats of violence, statements advocating racial, religious, or other forms of prejudice will not be tolerated. Persons wishing to discuss matters involving individual district personnel or students should present their comments and/or concerns to the superintendent during regular business hours. With that, I open the floor to anybody who'd like to make a public comment.
Good evening. Good to see you all again. Natalie Wren, Cornwall mom, here on behalf of Mothers Out Front. Thank you, Mr. President. Cragen. Thank you, Mr. Cragen.
Thank you for asking.
For that update. I very much look forward to hearing what y'all have to say, but unfortunately I have to go deal with bedtime. So I'm just going to do a quick dash chat and then head out. But I fully support any conversations that the board has on this matter. The reason that I'm here, I know you already know this, here again just to support this time-sensitive item of applying to the EPA's Clean School Bus Rebate Program. The deadline is, you remember? January 9. Yes! Woo! Thank you, Mr. Dade. It is January 9, and we have been in contact with West Point Tours. We're still trying to get a meeting in place, but Robert Brisman, I believe is his name, he has agreed. It sounds like he's on board, and he's ready to, to send that information to their grant writer to start the process, which is excellent. So we're going to poke him politely on that, but we do believe it's a lot more impactful to have the school board or our superintendent just check in with him. So we're asking that you please reach out to him this week to make sure that application has begun and that he has a strategy to complete it before the January 9 deadline. And I just wanted to address a little response that we did get from Mr. Harvey Saltland. I really appreciate. He did respond to us in emails, and I've heard from other members, there's concern about cost. Of course, we understand this could be expensive. After speaking with other teams from Mothers Out Front who have helped with their districts, as well as with Mr. Brisman, who has been in contact with Mid-City. They've had success with this where they managed to get buses 100% covered. Other towns are maybe 90%. And I understand that there's a concern with cost. However, we cannot argue it's too expensive until we have conducted an electrification plan. And that we can do for free. So the next step, once we apply to EPA, is to apply to NYSERDA to conduct that electrification plan. And because West Point Tours serves a priority district of Newburgh, that plan would be 100% covered by NYSERDA. So that's like the next step that we're gonna hassle you guys about in the coming year. So put on your seatbelts. But also just kind of give a little perspective, as a reminder, I know that, finances is an extremely important part of the job that you have here supporting the school district. I just want to remind you of coming from the parental concern about climate change, about our children's health. Combating climate change is not about saving money, it's about saving the planet and saving our kids' futures. So I'd really like you to please consider that as you have these conversations. So the last kind of request, and maybe this is already on your agenda, is to please set up a subcommittee so that you can work on this item as a team. Please, I've sent you a few emails. I'd love a response. We would love to meet with you, Mr. Cragen, or anybody on the board to offer the resources that we have from Mothers Out Front. They have a step-by-step guide. It's I wouldn't say it's idiot-proof, but it is pretty strategic and helpful. So we'd love to give you those resources and answer any questions or help in any way that a parent can. And I think that's it. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Any other public comment?
Hi, everyone. I was here 2 weeks ago, Cassandra Cogville here, also representing Mothers Out Front. Also looking forward to hearing some updates from Mr. Dade. I'll be able to stay, so yeah, looking forward to that. And I just want to reiterate what Natalie said, just in case it's helpful, and I'm not sure what we're going to hear later, but, I've been thinking about this, and we all know what a fantastic school district we have here in Cornwall, right? I mean, that's part of the reason why my family and I decided to live here. That's why a lot of families have decided to live here. We're really proud of our district's leadership in the Hudson Valley region, which comes really from putting our children and their future first, right, when it comes to every decision that we make. And I'm very proud of that as a parent. When I ask myself, what does the future look like in 15 and 20 years, I don't want our children to ask why we didn't make decisions that were consistent with our leadership position in this region, right? Why didn't we do more to protect them from harmful gases when we could? Why didn't we take the free money from the federal government to help us do that quicker and sooner? Ultimately, we will have to do that, right? Because there's a state mandate. Our children really care about the climate. I think if you talk to any child, that's one of the top issues for them. So if we're really, really child-centric, let's put their interests and their future first and really, really think about this from a long-term perspective. Is this the legacy that we want to leave behind for them? Just want to point out that the neighboring school district in Middletown actually already has 4 electric school buses, and they're having another 10 coming in for the 2025-26 school year. All of these buses were purchased with grants which cover the cost differential between diesel and electric. According to a representative from Mid-City, the Middletown District Bus Company, quote, drivers and scholars absolutely love the EVs, saying they've made an overall positive experience for the company and community, in addition, obviously, to the environmental benefits. So fortunately, for those who may not be aware, actually, Mid-City just acquired West Point Tours, the bus company which serves both Cornwall and Newburgh. So they are very familiar with this process, and all we need is just your support to help push them to definitely apply for this grant. Your support is really, really critical to make sure that we have this in place for that January 9th deadline. If you could please call them this week just to make sure that they know that we have your support. I'll just in closing, if this, I'd say if our district is really student first, I ask you all to take a stand on this issue and act as befits a district of our leadership standing and caliber. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Anybody else for public comment? All right, thank you very much. Next item on our agenda here is committee updates. I'm going to go in no particular order. Actually, I'm going to go in a particular order. It's the order that I have on my page. Whether that makes sense for this order or not, I don't know, but here we go. Policy, Brendan.
Yeah, so we are on track to have our second meeting, it seems loud, after Christmas. So I'll start working with Terry and then our members to coordinate that. That'll be the second of our third meeting of the year. We'll knock out the other third of policies that are up for review, plus tie some loose ends from our previous one. But I'll share that, probably by our next meeting, we'll have that scheduled.
Wonderful, thank you. No, I lied. I'm not even going to go in the order I have on my page. I'm going to skip to communication so I can stick with you.
Thanks, Jim. So we tentatively have a meeting scheduled for next week to discuss how to coordinate basically with the Facilities Committee on launching a, let's call it a capital project update / preview, both capital project 1 and potential capital project 2. I have already asked some members of the committee if they would like to attend the upcoming Facilities Committee meeting. Christian, I think you're the last one who I have not asked, so that's next Tuesday. Facilities Committee meeting, you don't have to come, but basically,
I received the invitation, and I will consult my children to see if I can schedule.
got it. And just so you know, though, you would be showing up as a non-participating
As a
member.
community member.
Yes. So, but I think anyway, it's great to coordinate between the two committees since our work will be so intertwined over the next few months.
Wonderful, thank you. As Facilities Committee Chair, I'll continue on that. We do have a meeting next Tuesday at 6 p.m. at the district office. Our last meeting, we got a presentation from Palumbo Group here to the full board, which really covered everything we covered at our last facilities meeting, so I won't rehash that here. The next meeting, we're getting rough price estimates from Palumbo Group on all of the needs list that was left over from the last capital project and new needs which have been identified. So we're going to try and take a first stab at trying to digest what is the total number, knowing that with $5 million saved in our capital reserve, we can go out to our voters with the state aid that would be available to us for an approximately $20 million capital project. So getting a feel for what is that total number and kind of start to whittle the projects down to be handled to get to that $20 million number. So that's next Tuesday at 6 p.m. at the district office. Visitation, Richard.
Can I just make a comment about the
Please.
Facilities Committee? And I know I brought this up before, but last time when we did capital project in 2022, we live streamed the Facilities Committee meetings, and I'm wondering if that's something we should look at doing again, because we're going down that path again, and I'm wondering if that would help inform people and community members as to what exactly we're doing and why we're doing it.
Yeah, so last time was definitely a different for several reasons. One, it was the first time that we'd had a capital project of that magnitude in living memory. Two, there was a big issue with location of would we do a multi-sport athletic complex, and if we did, where would it be located? So those were really contentious issues. This go around, it's really just all of these projects have been identified. The public is aware of them. The list has been out there, and it's really just whittling down existing projects. So it's a much different feel. Possibly something to think about. I'll have to talk to Terry and see. I don't know if there's a capability to do that from the district office, if we'd have to move the meeting, if we can do it on this short of notice. But it's definitely a lot different this time. And I think to Brendan's point about having communications committee there, it's so we can have a community forum and make sure that we certainly, before this goes out to a vote, we will have community forums where people will have the opportunity to attend, see what's proposed, and ask any pertinent questions. So it's definitely an important part of the process, and it will be included. I don't know if we'll be able to arrange that by next week, but we'll look into that. And no visitation?
I'm up. Okay. So the only update I have is I emailed Megan and Terry a couple weeks ago to schedule our fall visitation. I've officially now heard back from all the committee members as to their availability and what days work best for them. So I'm going to work with administration to get that scheduled as soon as possible. I know a couple things. High school, definitely we want to revisit the drop schedule and community lunch. I know there's been some stuff out there about that, so we definitely want to revisit that and see what's going on. And yeah, that's the only update I have. Thank you.
Thank you. And I would just ask, as soon as you have that schedule, lock in which of your members are able to attend. Because in the past, we've always, left it open to other board members who aren't on the committee if there are openings to attend. So the sooner you could get that out to board members if you need
Yep.
additional representation would be great.
Absolutely.
Audit committee, Christian?
So I'm going to do 3: audit, strategic planning, and an update on curriculum committee, exploration group. The audit committee has done its work for the year until the internal audit is back. So that should be in June, so there is nothing to report. On the RFPs for the strategic planning, I have read all 3 that we had, and I'll be giving you the feedback on that, and we are going again tomorrow to kind of finish up a review of the 3 and have a discussion, so we should have something to report, or at least we'll have information before next meeting for you about at least the information on the document. So that's moving along. And the 3rd I circulated last week to the members of the curriculum committee, exploration group, a model charter. And I think that it would be, it's not the only possible way, but I think that what was good about the model charter, it basically said what it does, but also what it doesn't do, and also gives pretty specific information about, proposed membership on it, as well as actions that it can and can't take. So if you like, I can circulate that more broadly, but we are moving ahead on that, and hopefully we'll be able to discuss that and come back with something more concrete.
Great, yeah, thank you. On curriculum, I would say, yeah, the 4 of you get together and meet, and then when you've got, 4 heads together, bring that up full board update discussion would be great. Strategic planning, thank you too for doing that. Christine and I have reviewed them. I need to write out my thoughts in a little bit better way. Terry's reviewed them, so I think what we'll look to do is get a meeting with the 4 board members and Terry on the calendar, so we can all discuss who we think the best choice is there, and then bring that to the full board. And audit is audit, great. All right, thank you, Christian. As I go through my list, OXPA, I've got you, Christine. Anything new to report there?
No, sorry, the OXPA meeting is virtual this Wednesday. So if it's something that you're interested in that you cannot typically attend because you have to be on site, you are welcome to dial in Wednesday night, yeah. Christian also attends if there's something else.
I don't know if Karen Meyer, who's the director of OXPA, has sent the Zoom link, but
She has not. She just made
So, I
the
mean,
announcement that it was then, so.
I think it will be widely distributed to everyone, to all of our emails, but so I would say look out for that in the next 2 days if you're interested in participating in the meeting.
All right, and the only other thing, unless somebody else has an update to share that I've missed, please stop me, but the other kind of working group that we established this summer was the Code of Conduct, and I've got Christian and Brendan and Richard. Have you guys, any updates there?
Not yet.
All right, there we go. Anything else on committees that we're missing? All right, thank you, everybody. So that brings us to our consent agenda. Purpose of the consent agenda: permits the Board of Education to make more effective use of its time by adopting a single motion to cover those relatively routine matters which are included. Any member of the board who wishes to discuss individually a particular piece of business on the consent agenda may so indicate, and that item will be considered and voted on separately, thus preserving the right of all board members to be heard on any issue. It is recommended that the Board of Education approve the following consent agenda items as submitted by the Superintendent of Schools. Items 2 and 3, light business here as we were on Thanksgiving, so there's only a few days of school between our last meeting and this one. Can I have a motion for the consent agenda? Christian so moves. Can we have a second?
Second.
And would anybody like to pull item 2 or item 3 for discussion? Okay, so then we will take a vote on items 2 and 3 on the consent agenda. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, motion carried. On to our next item here.
Jim, could I just make a motion to move up the EV bus update, new business in respect to our guests so that we can give that update earlier? And since I think it's just informational, before we move on to the old business. So can I make that motion? Or
You
I
can
will make that motion.
Make that motion. Do we have a second? Second? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, sure. So we will do the EV bus update. Terry?
All right, so few updates for the board and our public at large. So first, I've been in contact with Robert Brisman, who is the president of West Point Tours. He is well aware of the mandate that is currently being dictated by the state. He and Mid-City Tours are well aware of kind of what all that entails. So good news is they're aware of the grant. They've already asked for our sign-off on applying for that grant. In the email to me, he says he understands that January 9th, 2025 is the deadline, so we're good there. So he understands when it needs to be turned in. So we do plan on signing off on that because it doesn't bind the district in any way. We could receive funding and still not move forward with anything. So we do plan to do that. They're in good shape. They don't need any assistance at this time. They have people dedicated to grant writing, and whatever information Mothers Out Front has, I'm sure they have as well. So I think they'll be in good shape to finish the process and submit that. What I wanted to spend some time on today was just making sure that the board knows a few pieces of information, because my job is to make sure that we're just fully informed as we move forward. First, one of the things that we've really relied on is working with West Point Tours and their cost structure and things of that nature, which funnels down to us. So they know that EV buses is a mandate. They know that by 2027, you aren't going to be able to buy diesel buses. So they know this. So they're factoring that into like their long-range plan. Out of all the districts that they serve, what is our plan working from 2027 to 2035 and backwards map it? Because no one can afford to just go from 0 to all EV all at once. So I trust them to continue to provide us with that information of year 1, it would look like this, year 2, and then we would have to factor that into our budget process when we go out for RFPs for transportation period. It may be West Point Tours, it might be other companies vying for our business here in Cornwall. So that's really important to understand that in 2028, we might be operating with another company. That said, we've absolutely loved working with West Point Tours, but it's just really important that we're not making decisions today that could impact what we're deciding later on. 2, amongst us as superintendents, we've really had some concerns with unanswered questions that I think the state is still grappling with. So while you can put something on paper that we support fully EV by 2035, Central Hudson is a little concerned with what does that look like with their infrastructure. So we've heard firsthand that they don't have the capacity as it stands now to support an EV state. So that would be, again, something that we would have to work with. You can't force districts to do something that our electric company isn't ready for. I'm not saying that they will not ever be ready, but right now they would not have the capacity to support the needs of all of our Newburgh and Cornwall going EV right now. A gradual, yes, but they have said if Newburgh and Cornwall were to go right now, we wouldn't have the infrastructure right now to support that. I think we're aware of the difference in cost. Just to throw out some figures, gas diesel buses currently run around 110K. EV buses cost between 280 and 325. So we're talking about threefold increase in cost. We've had conversations with our Minnesink colleagues of the range of EV buses during the winter months and things of that nature. Right now they have a range of 100 to 120 miles. And even as small as we are in Cornwall, our range extends beyond that in our three-tier system. As superintendents, we've had questions like, I get on School Messenger at 10:30 to call an early release due to weather. What happens with EV buses when you're planning for a charge at 12 o'clock between your second and third run, and I'm making an emergency call to send all students home early. So these aren't things that are going to impede us forever, but I just really want to make sure that we're being disciplined and have all these answers, these questions answered, because they're really important as we think of the health and safety of our students beyond what might come with having a diesel bus. So we are excited. Again, Mr. Brisman is fully committed to applying for the EPA grant. He understands the deadline. We're going to sign off on that as partners with them. I believe Newburgh is as well. And then we'll have further conversations as a board as more information comes in. But right now, 2027 is an important date to keep in mind of when companies will have to start buying EV buses only. And then that roadmap by New York State is until 2035. So if I was the business person, it would be, what does that look like over a period of 8 years to fully support the clients that I have now?
Thank you for that update. Any questions? Christian?
Two questions. The first one is that have they explored repowering existing diesel buses? So I know there's at least one bus company in New York State that has basically replaced the drivetrain, with internal combustion engine with an electric, so basically taking a bus, and that the cost is actually comparable to a diesel bus. So this is something from 2 months ago, and the number that they cited was something between 120 and 180 to do that. Now, there are some regulations about how long a bus can be in service before it has to be basically sunsetted, and that would maybe affect some existing buses, but that, I was wondering if that has been explored, and is that a cheaper option that we can, to bring down the cost? And the second is, I know when we think of school buses, we all think about the long yellow bus, but school buses actually are not just that. They are vans, they are, basically SUVs for different things, and whether it'd be feasible to replace at least those that would probably be cheaper, but also are a lot of miles in terms of routes for disabled students, students going to local programs, and maybe that's a slice of the salami that we can actually handle that would not be the prohibitive cost, and maybe that's a step that we can move toward it, and perhaps this is something, as we explore it, that can be incorporated into our strategic plan about how we are going to cost that and what the priority we're going to put on that.
Thank you. You have any information on that? I don't have any information on the
The only
repowering the buses,
The only piece that I just think makes it complicated is it's a trickle down. So you have Mid-City who supplies for West Point Tours, who supplies for us. So I don't think it's we get to pick a van and things of that nature. I think it's kind of I would love to hear from West Point Tours and Mid-City what is their long-range plan, and we figure out what the resultant cost is as a district versus some other districts that get a much more healthy return on their tax dollars, like Middletown. That can look a little bit different. So I think Christian asked some great questions I don't have the expertise for. I think it would be a question for West Point Tours and Mid-City.
No, absolutely, they're good questions, so we should ask some West Point Tours, as, you know, really, it's, you know, John Fink, as he comes on board tomorrow, those are good questions for him. It's gonna be, there's gonna be a discussion that we're gonna be having for a decade, so, other questions?
Jim?
Brendan?
Really just to help me understand, this is all great. Thanks for the update. Generally, one of the things that gets me is just that I'm a little confused about is West Point Tours applying for the grant. So help me understand. The New York State mandate for schools is by 2035. It seems that there's a separate mandate for bus companies by 2028. So 27 would be their last year to buy diesel. So maybe there's not a good answer other than that's just the way it is. But why are they applying for the grant and not us?
So to answer the second part of your question, it's for all schools, you can't buy any new diesel buses in 2028.
So they're just
You have
affected
to
by
be-
the mandate.
You have to be 100% electrified by 2035.
Yeah, no,
You can't replace diesel equipment with diesel equipment in 2028. So that's not a West Point Tours versus us doing our own transportation issue. As
No,
far
you,
as to,
you point out I said that it's a mandate for them. It's a mandate, still a mandate for us.
It's a mandate.
It just affects them. Yeah.
Correct.
But then why? I'm just confused. Why they're the one? I'm glad, grateful that they're taking the lead on the grant process. But why are they? If it's our mandate.
I'll let Terry take that.
Yeah. So again, remember, most of you were on the board, Tiffany and Eleanor, forgive me. The RFP process was really kind of an all-in. What is your total cost for all of our drivers, buses? It was an all-in, and we said, let's put that out there compared to all other companies. The same thing is going to hold true. We would not go out and buy a bus right now and say, we're going to buy this bus and give it to West Point Tours. We trust West Point Tours to do their replenishment on a whatever basis it is. So this would fall, in my opinion, directly in line with that. If we must be by 2035 fully EV, our RFP process would look different to say, company one might say, we have an aggressive approach. In the next 6 years, we're going to be completely EV. I guarantee you their quote is going to come back looking a little bit different than client B to say, we're going to take all the way till 2035. Here's what you can expect from us in the next 5 years. So I think there's some school districts that operate their own buses. Those are the ones that you see saying, hey, we bought our first EV bus. It's internal. When you work with a company like West Point Tours, you're really relying on them for the procurement of buses and things of that nature.
So it's basically the market pressure is working on them. It's in their incentive
Right.
to pursue this. Okay, and then
One other point on that, and then the important part of that EPA grant is the EPA is still looking for us as partners because they know that we're their client. So do you have the partnership with the districts that you're working with, which would enhance their ability to get funding in the grant?
Got it. Okay. And then the second part is that Central Hudson bid that you mentioned. You mentioned they wouldn't have the infrastructure. Obviously, we're not turning on a light and going all EV tomorrow, but do you know what they mean by infrastructure? Does that mean capacity or charging stations or both? And which also brings up another question of how would we handle the charging stations?
Great question. So there would need to be a comprehensive assessment done. West Point Tours did already reach out to Central Hudson, give us a ballpark of what infrastructure would cost for this, and it already came in excess of 1.1 million just for infrastructure. So this is not a light ask. There's a lot. Just think of how long it took the town just to get the 2 charging stations at Town Hall for our whole town. That was not an easy flip for them. Now you add what would that look like for buses, what bus depot, and I would assume that we wouldn't be charging right at West Point Tours only. There would have to be other depots across our area.
But West Point Tours is looking at it as still folded into their challenge.
Yes.
They're not looking at it like, hey, we're going to do the buses, you do the charging stations. They're looking at it all as their, on their plate.
On their plate, and I would expect that they would send us a letter saying, as we move forward, please know, just like they did when, they came to us and said, we've held you constant for a long time.
Yeah.
They gave us a warning letter to say, costs have escalated. Please know that when you ask for the RFP, the cost is going to go up significantly. I would see this looking just the same in 3 years.
Got it. Okay.
Any other questions? All right, thank you. We will now go back to the future and back to old business. Number 1 on old business is our board guiding principles and operational agreements discussion. We emailed out, there was just 2 minor changes which were emailed out earlier and printed out here based on our discussion last meeting. So I guess I will ask, we've discussed this 2 meetings in a row, this is meeting 3. So I believe that we captured, Christine and I, the comments and made the appropriate changes to those 2 points. If there's any further comments on those 2 points, and if not, I would open it up for a vote. So any comments? Okay, not seeing any. So I would say that we will then take a vote on this if we want to institute these as our guidelines, operating guidelines, and guiding principles for the board. So all in favor?
Well, we haven't opened it with a motion.
Thank you. Motion. Can I have a motion? Can I have a second? Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? All right, wonderful. Thank you for that. Next item on our agenda is the regionalization update. So this is mostly for the community, a little for the board. As our discussion at our last meeting about the NYSED regionalization initiative, we did draft a letter. We sent it to NYSED on, where's my notes? Monday, 11/25, which was the last day for public comment. We received an email response very quickly, within an hour, from Assistant Commissioner for Education Policy, whose name I was supposed to write down and I didn't. Mike Frank, yes. And he responded with some sort of boilerplate language, and I just said, thank you very much for your quick response. I think you missed points 2 and 3 of our letter. And he actually called the district office asking to speak with me. Terry and I were able to speak with him for about 5 minutes on the afternoon of Tuesday, 11/26. About an hour before we spoke with Mr. Frank, Commissioner Rosa sent an email with a memo to all superintendents, and that was, picked up by some press outlets, and NISBA sent it out in their update on Sunday. But essentially, the email update from Commissioner Rosa says that they are making revisions to their regionalization initiative, and they are having 2 points here. One is clarification on monitoring and amendments. So they are going to revise the rule to note that suggested amendments to regionalization plans will remain advisory rather than mandatory. This ensures the districts maintain full control over the plans they develop. The second point, voluntary participation acknowledgement. To address concerns about mandatory participation, a new provision will be added which allows districts, in consultation with their school boards, to elect not to participate in the regionalization planning process by submitting written notification by January 15th, 2025. In my reading of that, I said, okay, well, there's the planning process, and then there's the plan, and then there's the amendment, and she addresses the planning process and the amendments, but not the plan. In talking to Mr. Frank, and I felt in our brief 5-minute conversation that he was really sincere and that they wanted this to be voluntary. I pointed out to him there's sort of 3 aspects, and they only address 2 here. So basically, I think the stance we have to take is wait and see Obviously, other groups noticed that discrepancy as well. And will they address that third discrepancy? Will the plan still be mandatory even if you don't participate in the process? And the amendment is, logically, it doesn't really follow. So I would hope they would address that point and add some clarification there. At this point, I think as a board, it's best that we just sort of wait and see. But, we do have that January 15th guideline. So I think it's something that we will bring up again for discussion on whether or not we want to participate in that planning process. We'll bring that up in our first meeting in January, which I don't have that date handy, but I assume is before the 15th. So, questions, comments from the board on this? Brendan?
You picked up on, I guess, the points that were probably fairly obvious to most people that were reading them. The one thing I would try to identify is when will this new section 124-25D be revised so we can take a look at the language. It seems like that the pattern that we're noticing here is when speaking to constituents or to stakeholders, they will say one thing, and then you go back and track it to the language, and there are those worrisome gaps. So if we sound skeptical, I think they have earned our skepticism. So I would like to see what that revised language ends up being, and hopefully not, the night before they vote on it. Not putting it to you. I'm just saying that I think we should all stay on this because these dates are going to come on us pretty quick, and we want to make sure we really understand in the end what this is.
I agree wholeheartedly. Any other questions, comments? Christian?
I mean, I read this, the response to our letter in the light and context of the response to, I believe it was Mr. Regano's letter, who was a lawyer representing some of the Long Island districts, and there was a response from State Ed's counsel on that. And I think he made it very clear that, State Ed fully has the power to do things that are mandatory. It's in the Constitution, it's in education law. It's why it can remove any member of our board for violating certain things. It's why they can remove superintendents. They can change the borders of our school district, and that's fully within their purview. And we just have due process rights if they initiate something of that sort. And I think they made that very clear that we're not trying to force something, but this also doesn't change the nature of our powers in the school districts that are kind of framing it as like an usurpation of authority. It's ahistorical, and it's probably not within how the New York Constitution and education law has framed the relative powers. So I think the point is they're saying, if it makes you feel better, we'll make it voluntary, because really what we want to do is start a conversation. And I think that, so I think the point about it is the state is basically saying, if you want a concession on language, we'll give you a concession on language to move the process along. And that the emergency nature of the rule was simply that they didn't go through the regulatory review unit in the governor's office of the budget, and that was just to expedite the process of collecting information. So the point about it is, it wasn't like they skirted the process, they just went for something that they could have done. It'd be a matter of time. So I don't think this really changes that. I'm glad that they responded to people, but I think with the number of people asking questions, it was more convenient for them to move forward by changing the language and trying to get people to be part of the process rather than being on the outside of the tent yelling in.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think overall, I agree they probably have the legal authority. I think other people are going to sue them or have already initiated a lawsuit. I don't think that we should do that as a district, but we're going to see how this plays out in the courts and where that goes. I think ultimately their messaging was less than ideal, and they could have rolled it out a better way. But it is where it is, and I think it's just as a board something we need to monitor, and we need to have a discussion at our first meeting in January of whether or not we want to participate in that process and see where that language comes out.
Supporting your observation, Jim, I think that the legal process has started, and our participation in it doesn't change how the outcome, and we get to see how that will be litigated and adjudicated. And I'm sure we will know when it is.
Absolutely. And I think the real thing they're looking for at State Ed here is not necessarily for schools in our county and Rockland and Westchester and Dutchess County. It's for schools in the Adirondacks and the Southern Tier, and places where there's really, gaps in districts and a lot of declining enrollment. And they're trying to really kickstart it for those groups, which doesn't mean that positive outcomes couldn't happen for our district and neighboring districts, but I think that's really the nexus behind it. So, comments or questions from anybody else on this?
Should they move forward, or, well, they are going to move forward, should we move forward with joining the planning process? Have we started thinking about how we would participate in that?
Leave that to Terry.
So Megan and I are still collecting information from our respective groups as well. We have no urgency whatsoever right now of compiling a bunch of information unless we know for sure from the board that that's the direction you want to go. To Jim's point, I think that there's a lot of good intent behind it. It's the messaging is awful, and for Megan and I, we love to see some other districts present a plan and see, oh, look what you're actually allowed to do. You can share an ENL teacher across 3 districts or 2 districts or something of that nature. So this is what the process could look like, but we're not in any rush to meet any January 15th deadline or whatever they have out right now until we hear back from the board.
My only contribution to that discussion would be, number one, we have to make sure that our participation in the planning process does not mean that we are already signing up to, be beholden to whatever conclusions. I mean, it's more likely that we would be mandated to adhere to whatever they agree to, regardless of whether we participate. I would think that being at the table is better than not being at the table, because of that reason. So, but to Terry's point, it seems like administration may be looking to us to tell them what we think we should do. So
We're going to have a discussion at our first meeting in January.
Yeah. Anyway, yes.
When the language comes out, because to your point, it all depends on how it's written, right? Does not participating. How do they address that they've addressed only 2/3 of the issue, right? Does participating in planning, can you participate in planning and then not sign on to the plan if you don't like the plan? Because you could get some benefits just out of the planning, and you could decide to, do something ad hoc with a neighboring district without participating fully in the plan, or the counterpoint that you just made, you don't participate in planning and you have to abide by a plan that you've had no input in. That could be bad too. So we will wait and see what the language is. We will wait and see what it looks like. A lot of open questions, and we just need to continue to monitor it. And Terry, I just want to piggyback on something that you said of you're looking for other districts and looking to see what is out there and what's possible. It's interesting. There's a YouTube video that Nassau, Suffolk, BOCES put on for mid to late October with Jeff Madison, who is the commissioner of the Education Policy P through 12 Education Committee. He's the boss of the guy we talked to, and Mike Frank. So they were both on a Zoom with a representative from Nassau, Suffolk, BOCES. It's like an hour and a half long. He was oddly evasive. He's like, we are specifically not telling people what they can do because we want them to be creative. And they weren't giving examples of like what they want. It was kind of weird. So they're specifically like, we want to put this out there and we want everybody to be super creative and dream stuff up, and we're not going to give any examples. So I found that odd, but if you have an hour and a half of your time, I can email the link to folks if you'd like it. With that, that brings us to our second recognition of visitors. Any takers for public comment? Going once, going twice? All right, with that, can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
And a second from Eleonora. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Thank you very much. We will see you in 2 weeks.